Welcome to Print Fail Friday, where failure is always an option, but we're going to try to reduce those failures as much as possible. We have some shatteringly great fails for you guys today. Let's see if we can all learn something. Let's fix it. Thanks again for joining us on Print Fail Friday. Again, these are just some community source fails that we found across the internet. If you want to get your fails reviewed and looked at by an expert, make sure you hit us up on Twitter or Instagram or email us YouTube at 3dmusketeers.com. But let's roll into this first failure because we got a couple to cover and time's a ticking. Need help, don't know why it's skipping. Let's watch the video and see if we can pull anything from it. It's only 10 seconds long. It's an Ender printer, looks like an Ender 3. It's got a BL Touch. But I'm not picking up any noise that it is skipping. The first thing that I want to point out, though, is that this user is making a raft. And I'm not a huge fan of rafts. They're antiquated. Rafts we used back in the day when we wanted to print ABS, but we didn't have heated beds or heated chambers. So the raft was effectively your sacrificial layers that would end up warping and having problems, but you didn't care because you were peeling your part off of it to begin with. Now with heated beds and skirts and brims that are much better than they used to be, you don't really need a raft anymore. But that doesn't necessarily solve why this skipping is occurring. It appears that it is just not extruding in some areas, and in a case like this, there are a couple of things to check. One, what is your flow rate? What is your temperature? Rafts normally have quite a bit wider lines, especially on the layer that they're working on right now, than your standard print would, and that helps it really, one, stick to your build plate, but two, stick to your model. And you could viably be overshooting what the hot end is capable of doing. Remember, these are not all that large hot ends inside of a Creality printer. And if you're already running like 195 or 200 and you're trying to lay down some thick lines, you may not be putting enough heat into it to get it to extrude out. The next option is that you've got a nozzle clog. Your nozzle could be clogged, although looking at the rest of this print, I don't think this is it. It appears that the nozzle is running just fine. But by removing the material, installing new material, and trying it again, you'll know pretty quickly whether or not the nozzle is clogged. Number 3 is that you have heat creep and or a messed up Bowden tube. Since these printers are not all metal, the Bowden tube goes all the way down right to where it intersects with the nozzle. This is common in affordable hot ends, however, it poses some problems. The main one, this Bowden tube is a wear item. And if you've been using your printer for a while, you've been playing around with higher temp materials, and higher temp materials being like PETG for a non-all metal hot end, you might have worn out your Bowden tube, creating either a fair bit of excess friction, which is not going to let it extrude all that well, or two, a clog or a jam that's not allowing filament to pass through. Either way, you're not getting filament to where it needs to go. So generally to me, let's switch out the filament. Let's try new filament. If you're still getting the same problems, let's check the Bowden tube. And if that is still not the problem, my guess would be that you've got a clogged nozzle. But I hope that helps. This one can be a bit frustrating because there are so many different potential problems. But if you go at them systematically of, all right, let's start with the filament, then let's do the Bowden tube, then let's look at the nozzle, you can generally save yourself some time there. We are going to be doing a video soon on Capricorn tube versus generic, like the white style Bowden tube. And then if I can get my hands on it, some clone Capricorn tube to see how everything lines up, to see is it worth spending the extra money on the Cap tube. We're in contact with them and hopefully things go well for that video. Make sure you get subscribed if you want to see something like that, because this apparently is quite a common problem And I think a lot of it does lead back to the crappy Bowden tube that is used from the factory by Creality. Whether your Bowden tube is blue or your Bowden tube is white or any other color, if it is not a Capricorn tube, I have reason to believe that it may not be all that good. Even the clone stuff of CapTube, I don't know if it is as good, but we're gonna find out, and I'm excited for it. So get subscribed for that one. Reddit, I need your help. I left my Ender 3 printing while I was out. Problem number 1. And my print failed, and then I come back to this. What do I do? You don't leave your printer unattended. And yes, that's the asshole way of, saying the issue. We've got 2 particular photos here. We've got this one, and we got this one. And let's just start off with it. Let's get some F's in the chat, because this hot end is pretty much a goner. This is the same style hot end. You are looking at it, roughly in the same perspective. They've got filament all the way up to the freaking heatsink. And they've now also taken the heatsink off. Now, they have removed the Bowden tube, which is a great thing to do because you don't want to do any of this with a Bowden tube still in your printer if you do not have an all-metal hot end. You want to put everything back together, do not reinsert the Bowden tube, and heat up the printer. With a hot end that is not all metal, you will want to look at going to like 250, 255 max. Do not go above 255. You will damage your hot end if it still has a liner in it. You could go above it. You got to be careful. But what you want to do is you want to get that plastic start to get soft. Okay, we're going to show you what that looks like. We have another Blob of Doom fail coming a little bit later in the video, so make sure you guys watch to the end to see that one. That's really about your only way. And I've said this in previous videos, and I'm going to say it again. Buy spares, have many, especially when it comes to heaters and thermistors, the temperature sensor, the thermistor. Because look at where your heater is and where your thermistor is. That little blind hole is a thermistor, or where it's supposed to be. You're gonna have a real hard time getting all of this off, and if you happen to break a thermistor wire or a heater wire, your hot end should viably stop working. If your hot end continues to heat and you have broken one of the 4 wires that are there, 2 for your heater, 2 for your thermistor, turn off your printer immediately. It is going into thermal runaway. It might heat for like 10 or 15 seconds, but if it heats for more than like 25 or 30 seconds, kill it. Your printer does not have thermal runaway protection, and basically yeet it out the closest window that you can, because you do not have a 3D printer, you have a fire hazard. Be smart. These hot ends are not expensive, and for the amount of effort this user is going to have to go through to save it, I don't think it's personally worth it. We can look on the second photo and see that it looks like they had a silicone sock on there. My assumption here is that that silicone sock fell off, and that caused this initial print failure. Maybe, maybe not. We can see the kind of like the outline of filament on the inside of the heater sock. This whole situation sucks. Like, I would take this, I would take my heater wires out, I would take my thermistor wires out, and I would just replace the whole dang hot end. It is not worth trying to fix it, in my opinion. It is way more work than it's worth. But what do? You get yourself a Wise Cam and a smart plug minimally. You set up the Wise Cam so it is constantly watching your 3D printer, and that way, if you do for some reason have to leave, you can monitor the 3D print from your phone anywhere you go. And if for some reason you start to see something you're not comfortable with, you can kill the printer with the Wi-Fi plug. Now, do understand, kill it, leave it for about 10 or 15 seconds, then turn it back on so that the fan to cool the heatsink still functions and doesn't just start to soften a bunch of filament inside of your Bowden tuber, inside of your hot end. That's going to be a bad time, because remember, when your printer turns off, your heaters are still hot. They're now off, but it's all still hot, and that heat has to go somewhere. And heat, it rises, and it will cause clogs. So be careful about that one. That is another trap for young gamers. But I think the real failure here was that they were likely not all that confident in their printer. They left it, and they left it for a long time without having a way to monitor its performance. I don't care what 3D printer you have, until you are monumentally comfortable with it, you should never leave a 3D printer unattended. Now, I'm saying that as someone that does it all the dang time. But I'm not working with an Ender 3. Let me be very clear about that. And our Ender 3 V2 that we have, I never run that printer unattended because I don't trust it to not do something like this. So, buy spare heaters, buy spare hot ends, buy spare thermistors, and if you don't know which ones to buy, I'll put links in the description for you. Now, my Prusa i3 has started layer shifting dramatically across the x-axis. This one's a bit of a tough one. We've got a lot of problems going on in this print. Let's take a look at a closer photo. I think we're over extruding. We've definitely got some retraction issues we can see from down here as well. The first layer looks like it's way too close, and we've got all these wiggle shifts. There's a lot going on here, but you know where there's not a lot going on is with my segue to our sponsor, 3D Musketeers. We are here to make it so you don't have to deal with problems like this and other problems that you're going to see here on PrintFailFriday. We understand that 3D printing can be difficult, and that's okay. We've got a bunch of printers here. We've got a bunch of designers, a bunch of engineers, and a bunch of awesome people. And hey, we're hiring too. We need CAD people. We need marketing people. We want you to come join our team. But if you are having issues with your printer and you're like, screw this, I don't want to do this anymore, reach out to us at 3D Musketeers. Links will be in the description down below. Because we can help you solve these problems by taking over the printing for you while you deal with what actually happened. Because especially when you're up against a tight deadline, this can help quite a bit in making things go a little bit more smoothly. But if you want to get your ideas out of your dang head and into your dang hands, we can help you at 3D Musketeers. But let's get back to it. I think one of the most probable solutions to this, and it's an odd one because I've seen this on my Taz 6, but I've never seen it on one of my Prusas. Your hot end is loose. On an E3D style hot end, you've got a groove mount, and groove mounts work by mounting, hear me out, in a groove. If your entire extruder system on a Mark III's is not tight, this will wiggle ever so slightly. And when it wiggles ever so slightly further down the tube, things start to wiggle quite a bit. And that can cause some print issues. I am a little bit concerned that there is more than one problem going on here. These issues here look like wiggle, but this issue up here looks to be a whole lot worse. And is that the part melting? I really don't know what's going on here. There is a lot to unpack, right? First layer is way too close. You've got some issues on your support material. We've got some retraction issues that we can see up top, and we've got a pretty serious layer shift. It looks like this thing is constantly over extruding, which if you do have a hot end that's loose, a little bit of over extrusion might cause your nozzle to move and wiggle just a little bit. I would highly recommend, and I'm going to follow up with this person, or try to at least, that they, one, go back to bone stock settings. Use stock Prusa settings. They work quite well. Yes, they're slow, but they work quite well. Then I want you to look at using good material. Something from Atomic Filament, Prusa Mint, Jesse PLA, Greengate 3D's recycled PLA. I don't care. Get from a reputable resource, because realistically, you could have crap filament too. Make sure that your screws on your extruder are tight. There are 4 up front, I believe, and 2 or 3 on the back. Go through your manual, and if you don't have a manual for your Prusa, go get it from Prusa's website and go through everything, because this shit sucks. I hate this. This takes a long time and realistically involves quite a bit of tuning. But I believe if they go back to stock settings, that can at least rule out all the custom stuff that is likely done here. Make sure you're using Prusa Slicer as well. It's a Prusa printer. It should be running Prusa Slicer. Now, we don't know anything about the Prusa printer. It's a Prusa i3, but there are lots of companies that call their printers Prusa i3s. This could be an ANET A8 for all that we know, and good lord, those things are problems. And Oddly, another one caught fire, and I am waiting to get the video and photos because they are relatively local to me, and I'm hoping at some point to get that printer from them so we can do a full autopsy on it and figure out exactly what happened. But it was thermal runaway. We all know it's thermal runaway, but I want to see where the fire started. So make sure you stay tuned and get subscribed if you want to see that video, because that will probably be a singular video where we tear this machine down. But either way, this one is going to require more work than some of the others. It's not a straightforward example of what could go wrong. And that's why we tell people, look, if you're getting heavily frustrated and you don't want to deal with stuff like this, that's why companies like 3D Musketeers exist. We have the printers. They are tuned. We know what we're doing, and it keeps these issues from happening. But we are not impervious to this. Our TAS 6 had this problem for months. It ended up being that because the TAS 6 only has one solid connection point, it could wiggle ever so slightly in its extruder mount. So I made new points. I just drilled holes, added some heat set threaded inserts, and screwed into it. And now our TAS 6 doesn't have this problem. It makes life a little bit easier. But I'm worried here that overall, this may not even be an actual original prusa printer, because I haven't seen this from a prusa printer in a while. This also could be loose belts, where the belt is so loose that it's jumping teeth. But because it fixes itself so quickly, I don't think it's that. It could be that the grub screws are loose on the X-axis pulley, but because it fixes itself again, I don't think it's that either. But make sure to check your belt tension, make sure your grub screws are tight, and a good way to check this is to tell the printer to move A-axis. I don't care what it is. What it's going to do is lock the movement of the printer. And then if you try to move your hot end back and forth, does it move when it shouldn't without causing the stepper motor to skip? If the answer to that question is yes, well, your grub screws are a little bit loose. A lot of potential problems in this one. I'm going to, again, follow up with the user on this and see if we can get this one taken care of. Because, yeah, my bet is loose hot end. My further guess is that this may not actually be an official prusa printer, because this is not all that common on these, and you gotta try to get this problem. But I want to help these guys nonetheless. Let's move on to the next one. Last but not least, we have my buddy, the 3D printing professor, saying, "Good morning, everyone. How is your day going?" Well, his day looks like it sucks. This is really shitty, and I don't like seeing this any more than anybody else. But what happened? Was it Colonel Mustard with the candlestick on the beautifully stained concrete floors?
Just give me a clear answer. Certainly. What was the question?
I don't think so. I think it was the 3D printer with the blob of doom in their workshop. We've seen some blobs of doom before. This one, I think, takes the cake. Not only did it make one hell of a mess, it also created enough force against either the part that was on the build plate or the build plate itself to yeet the build plate off onto the floor. That sucks. One thing I'm noting here is that this is not a tempered glass bed. When you are printing in basically any material that requires reasonably high temp heated beds, you do want to make sure that you're using a tempered glass bed, and preferably borosilicate. For those out there that don't know what borosilicate is, it's Pyrex, and not the new Pyrex, the old Pyrex, the good Pyrex. Because that temperature shift can cause your glass bed to break. Well, this thing getting thrown onto the floor caused it to break, but these little shards of glass are going to suck to clean up. And my condolences to the 3D printing professor, because don't go out there barefoot for a couple of weeks and make sure you really clean the floor, because little pieces of glass will be everywhere. The nice thing about tempered glass is that when it breaks, it shatters into a billion pieces, but they're normally not sharp. The windows in your car, except for the windshield, are generally tempered glass. And that's why when you see windows break out in cars, they tend to just, boom, shatter on you, because tempered glass is always under a little bit of force. It's like a Prince Rupert's drop, where it's quite strong until it's not.
This is the mystery of the Prince Rupert straw. You can try as hard as you can to break the bulb, but you can't. But if you even nick the tail, the entire thing will explode. Not shatter, but actually explode.
But how do you solve this problem? Well, you really can't. And this was the result. This is the actual blob of doom. We can see a printed part that, as far as I can tell, might have come unstuck. And I want to give a big shout out to Andy Calloway, because that is, well, that's just perfect. This is a never a fun thing to wake up to, but if you have blobs of doom, now you know you're not alone. The 3D printing professor, I'm glad you got your printer up and rolling. I'm glad this blob of doom was actually not that bad to fix from the hot end side, and the glass plate is not all that expensive. So you'll be back up and running in no time flat. This is also a big reason why I'm not a huge fan of glass build plates. They can break, and glass can go everywhere. And if you've got little hands or animals, this glass can end up stuck in their feet, in their hands, and that's a real pain to deal with. Make sure your glass plates are well attached. This blob of doom pushed off the clips that were holding on the glass bed as well. That sucks. I'm sorry to hear that, 3D printing professor. I'm hoping that you got this thing back up and running. But for those of you out there that are dealing with blobs of doom, you're not alone. It's something that happens to everybody. Anyways, guys, that's all I have for you today. Remember, failure is always an option. And if you do have some failures, make sure you tag us on Twitter, tag us on Instagram. I want to see your fails so that we can help you solve them. It's okay. We all have failures. Don't forget to leave a comment with what your favorite fail is, and do you think I got something wrong? Particularly this one is the one that I'm worried that I might have gotten something wrong on, because there are so many possible issues. I'd love to know what you guys think down in those comments. But seriously, stay safe out there. Clean up the glass from your dang floor so you don't get it in your feet. Don't forget to call your loved ones, and as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Your hot end is loose. A groove mount. I almost dropped that, but I caught it again, Grant. Look at that, over 2. Let's go. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and a huge thank you to our patrons. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. Right below me will be the entire playlist for Print Fail Friday, because this is episode 6. We're turning this into a series. Let's freaking go. And right next to it will be a perfectly handpicked video made especially for you. I want to know what you guys think of these fails down in those comments, and that's where I will see you, as well as in the next video. Take care.